Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be a part of this, and this is such a great idea. What a fabulous concept. So thank you for having me.
Okay. So if we talk a little bit about manners, I think manners first must be defined. So different people have a different perspective, and being in the Middle East is so multicultural.
Yes.
So let's first define it before we jump into what and how.
Sure.
Yeah.
So thank you. Okay. So manners are defined as how we interact in society. They are rules about how we interact in society. Etiquette are those overarching rules, and manners is kind of how you put them into practice. Every culture has a different definition or level of politeness, if we'll put it that way. Some things are impolite, some things are polite. Generally speaking, especially when it comes to children, there are some basic things which are, listening to adults, showing reverence and respect for adults, saying please and thank you in your given language, in the way in which it's said in your culture, being respectful, asking for things instead of taking things, waiting, interrupting politely, again, in your own way. And they do vary by culture, but these are just some overarching rules for polite behavior. And as children, we start as children with our parents, and our parents are our best example because we live by their example for us. But it really depends on the age of the child, like what is polite or impolite. So we see a little child like playing with something, and somebody may think it's a little bit rude because they're being a little bit loud. In some cultures that's embraced, and we love this, we love seeing it. Some cultures are a little bit more reserved. It just really depends, again, culturally, but also on the age of the child. But generally speaking, it's overarching rules of politeness.
So I think, what is the age? You're a new mom, it's your first child. Some people say, let them be, let them do, let them be themselves. And some people are like, no, you should start from day one. And so what is the right age?
Okay, so you should start from day one just through your own behavior. So, we all have different varying degrees of different levels of how much, I guess, direction or strictness we want to be with the education that we're giving our children. Some people are a little bit more relaxed about it. Other people are more strict. So that's really how you set it in your own home. It's never too early. So even from the beginning, when they're infants, it's never too early because they're mimicking your behavior. They're like sponges in whatever they do. I say if you want formal manners, like teaching politeness, start when they are starting to be, besides your behavior, start when they're starting to be verbal. So when they're about, let's say 2, like a year and a half, depending on the child, you can start with enforcing please and thank yous, and if you can, you're welcome. If you can, asking for things versus just taking things. You can start it at that age. It is never too early and it's never too late. So I always get this question, my child is 12. And they're like doing this and this, is it like too late? Are they going to be like this forever? And I'm like, as a step parent to older children, I would tell you that it's never too late for anything. They will get there for sure. So it's never too late, and it's really never too early either.
I think we have a lot of new moms, and it's like being a new mom is quite a daunting, lonely place, and you get so many opinions. It's quite interesting, especially about manners.
Yes.
And you have these, some toddlers or early walkers who are destroying the home, and some who don't touch anything.
Yes.
And then some moms feel uneasy because their child is a destructive child.
Right.
Personally, I think that's wonderful. I think, self-expression at that age is wonderful. But what is the view to control? Because you still want a normal life and you still want to feel like you have a bit of control of your child. What's your view on that, phase when they start walking 9 months to 2 years? How you give them a bit of direction?
So the responsibility is really honest. I totally relate to feeling isolated as a parent. Like we were just discussing how this is such an incredible platform that you're creating, because when I was not here at the time when my daughter was that young. We were in a different country. I was very much by myself, and I wish I had had this kind of direction and guidance, because those times when your child is going through things and you're like, oh my gosh, and you feel like total anxiety or stress, or you think, yes, but I like it. So, but I don't think maybe somebody else is not going to like it. So you're like, I don't know what to do. So in that case, the responsibility is really on us in the situation. Like if you're in our own home and you've obviously baby-proofed everything and you want them to have that expression, then that's fine. But I think teaching them, either paying a very close attention to them when they're in public or in somebody else's home, or you're out visiting maybe with family or something and you don't know how they're going to feel about it. That's us just being aware of the fact that they may do something like that. So then you just pay maybe a little bit more attention, or maybe you bring things that that they would really like to play with and you kind of distract them. So it's at that age with my daughter, it was always distract with something. So if she wants to get into something and she wants to do things, she wants to go for the shiniest, most breakable thing, because it's always the shiniest and breakable thing at that age, and like tear it down and like whatever. I always had something that was going to kind of distract her back into it if I felt like, okay, that was a little bit risky, or I would just mention to whomever's home I was in or whatever I was doing, maybe we would just want to move that one back because my daughter is really, she's curious, which is great. Being curious is a great quality, and we don't want to stifle that by any means. It's just, at a certain point, it's a balance. You have to kind of take a little bit more responsibility, and also it's a balance. Okay, so maybe they make a little bit of a mess. Most people understand, but there's that limit of you also don't want them destroying somebody else's house at the same time.
There's the table manner question. You go on holiday, and it's always the first holiday that you take a toddler or a 3-year-old, and you're sitting at the dining table in the hotel, and the kids next to you who are 2 or 3 are eating perfectly, well-mannered, and there's not a stain on the white tablecloth, and your children are very, very creative in the way they eat. So how do you start to kind of introduce table manners?
Okay, so again, the beginning is always our own example. So it's almost when this has happened, we kind of have to be on overdrive. Well, I mean, as a parent, like you become very aware of your own behavior around about your children, because I don't know about you and my daughter, like she'll say, all of a sudden something will just come out that I've said, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I should not have said that around her, because that was definitely now absorbed. So you have to kind of set the example. You almost have to be like on hyper mode about your own table manners. That's the first. And then the other thing too is kids. I mean, at certain ages, it's a developmental thing. So some children are they have much more dexterity with their fingers and their hands, and our children will all get there. They will all get there. It's just some of them are more advanced than others. Some of them, they really pick up. They're very intuitive, and they pick up how other people behave, and they really want to mimic. Other children are like, no, I'm very independent, and I want to do it my own way. So in order to encourage it at 2 years old, which is it's starting to, you can try to help them control a little bit the fork, a little bit, and the movement. Make easy things that they can pick up and move. That's the kind of the key. Make sure it's easy. Do the napkin game. So where does the napkin go? The napkin goes in the lap, and then obviously it's going to end up on the floor in 2 seconds. But you can try again, those kind of things. At about 2 years old, you can start to do things like this, like drinking. If you can try to get them, if they can move it to it's usually a sippy cup, but if they can move it to the face, you start to things like this, and it's basic. And then as they get older, about 3 to 4 years age, then they can start making sure that they're chewing with the mouth closed or attempting to chew with the mouth closed. Again, mastering the fork to the mouth, making sure that napkin stays in the lap, asking for things instead of reaching for things. But again, all children are all different. Some are super athletes, other ones are super, very good at sciences or whatever. Just the same thing with table manners. Some are really great with their hands, and some of them, they're just more creative about it.
So there's 2 schools of thought. They're like, let the child make a mess and let him try everything and try all the textures and how it feels on every part of his body, because that's really good for development and movement. And then you have the other school of thought is, if you don't do that napkin game, so how do you get a balance? Because you actually, sometimes it's not the outside world, it's your own home where your husband thinks, I was able to sit up at the table at 3 years and look at our children, or,
Yes, that discussion happens a lot, right? So you're just like, I was already doing this at 5, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, this is it is. So it is a balance. I think when they're young, though, I have to say, when they're young, about under 2 years of age, I get this question a lot from parents. Like, my daughter is 6 months, or my daughter is 1.5 years, and I'm like, that is quite young. But I think we need to be consistent. We need to have realistic expectations about our children for the age, and we need to make it fun for them. These are the 3 things. It needs to be engaging. So it's, why are they using their hands with the spaghetti? Because it's a texture thing, but also because it's more fun than, why do I need to use a fork? If I can use my hand and it makes it to my mouth and I'm eating, then why do I need a fork? You need to make it, there are some fun games that you can play to make sure that the child, either if you have siblings, even better, because then you can make it kind of like a fun competitive game with a prize, and that kind of gets them in the right mindset. So they're still voluntarily being a part of it. You're not forcing it upon them, but you're moving through it. So when they're young, though, the texture and the moving of the hands thing, it's really okay. It's actually good for them. But it's just when they get over 2, mainly really 3, 4, 5, this is really the age. And you just be patient as parents. Be realistic about the expectations, be consistent in doing it. So if you're going to start to teach table manners or minimal table manners, the fork to the mouth and using the fork and consistently and using the napkin consistently and asking for things consistently. It's not every single time that they speak over and over and over again, but it's making sure that they're aware that this is what you would like, and then giving them incentives to do it or a game to do it, and then always checking and being realistic about it.
So the other fun one is, so your kid is not that kid that's kind of sitting upside down on the chair all the time to show you who's boss, and he's not the kid who's making a mess, but he's politely sitting, really being amazing, well-mannered, but they fidget.
Yes.
And that fidgeting thing can, I think in early school days drives teachers blood insane. And there's a lot of solutions that we're actually listing to help control the fidgeting, but I'm sure historically there's a better way than, we have these games that help kids take that fidgety energy. We have now some blankets, because some kids' fidgeting is actually a bit out of control. But just when it's a kind of mild fidgeting, how do you, I remember I had a cousin whose kid used to do this all the time, rocking backwards and forwards. But there's this like slight fidgeting that's actually considered a bit impolite or unusual kind. How can you help them develop out of that?
So, I mean, it again depends on the age of the child. I mean, if they're really little, just the moving around and squirming thing, it can, and also maybe it could be coping mechanism for some children, or it can be they have a lot of energy and they just can't sit still. So it's difficult. My daughter is one of these children that moves quite a bit. It's a constant repetition that it's happening, but not in a punishing manner or tone. It's really that part of a thing. It's more, especially if you can sit near the child. This is my biggest thing with my daughter. So this is what we do with her, is when an adult, my husband or I, we sit next to her, and if she starts fidgeting, I just tap her knee a little bit, and then she realizes she's doing it, and then she'll stop doing it versus drawing attention to it, because my daughter's also very sensitive. So if we draw too much attention, then she says she gets really shy, and then and then you see the whole face drop, and then you don't want that either. If it's something you can have a code word. Code words are really fun. We tried code words. Code words didn't work as well with my daughter, so the hand thing works much better. But you can have code words depending on how old your child is, and just say, like whatever it is, I don't know, Cody or whatever it is, and you like whatever your child's name is, and you just like all of a sudden say that word out, and then they're like, oh wait a minute, I'm doing it, and I need to stop. But that depends on the age. But the hand thing really does work, and then just repeatedly just saying, oh honey, you're fidgeting, or that kind of like kindly about it, because they don't realize that they're doing it. So you don't want, the tone of your voice really matters, because then they can be really upset by it and really sensitive if they're doing it and they don't realize it.
So what are the 5? I mean, if we were going to say, I'm really big on creativity and letting them roam free and having muddy children and messy tables, I'm very big on that. But I do come from a very traditional Arabic background. So in my subconscious, I'm always thinking, but we have to play by the rules. But it's okay if the house is full of mud and the books are everywhere. And, I really think that's wonderful. But I think there must be a minimum number of 5 manners or 6 things that you should teach your kid.
Yes. So I think they're the magic words. So these are mine personally, which I think, and there's about a list. If you do a little research in all the books, there's like a list of usually 20, 25 that they say. They vary in degrees from actual manners to empathy and kindness, which is also very important. That's a very important part. But if we're talking about very strict, on the manner concept, also I think about manners and creativity. I think of manners in the way I teach manners when I teach children and also adults, is I teach it as a way to empower ourselves, and they're tools for us to use. They're not rules, because rules are they feel restrictive, and they feel like you're suffocating in the rules. And the more modern way, and the way that I like to teach it, is that they're enabling us and they're really empowering us to be the best versions of ourselves and to be successful. So I would say for children, it's the magic words, which are please, thank you, you're welcome, excuse me, I'm sorry. These ones are really big ones. Basic table manners are just chewing with the mouth closed, and not maybe reaching over and taking everything, using the napkin properly, and drinking etiquette, but not etiquette proper sitting, but just not dumping it down the front of oneself. I mean, this is a child, right? So those are 2 really important ones. I would say interrupting politely. So learning how to interrupt politely, not never interrupting, or children should be silent or anything like that, but learning how to interrupt politely. Being respectful when asking, and when you're in someone's home. So for example, if you're in someone's home, a respectful child is one that, doesn't go through all the cupboards in somebody's house, you know what I mean? Or like doesn't just go take everything, they ask for things. And then I think the last one would be introductions. So when they see adults, they say hello to them. And it'd be great if we could carry on with the conversation. I know some children are too shy and we're not there yet. That takes some time. But saying hello, greetings, and like nice to meet you, like eye contact. Those would be my top 5, like for a polite child. So if I have a child that comes to my home and they do some of those things, I'm always like, oh, what a polite child. So that would be what I would say.
And then they can go jump in the muddy
and then they go jump on the trampoline and they go like run in the garden and it's a mess. It's fine. It's a balance. I mean, it's like all of us as adults. We know, when teaching manners, it's really important to know them because they're life skills. So it's good to have them in the back of your mind. It's not that 90% of the time you act totally wild and they form a good foundation, and you can behave, but you know when to use those manners. You know when to behave properly and how to behave properly, and you pull them out at that time and you use them at the time when you need to. But at the same time, you can still go run through the mud and read the books and throw the books everywhere. I mean, it doesn't have to be rigid robot kind of thing. Yeah.
Great. We have a few minutes, so we're going to keep some at the end to take some questions.
Sure.
But I think you have some questions also.
Oh yes, we have the game. Yes.
Question from the audience.
The fun tantrum question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for this question. Okay, so teaching them no. Okay, so I think sometimes there's going to be an age in which, I'm not a developmental psychologist by any means, so as a parent, there are going to be age where children go through that because they just don't know how to express themselves and they don't know how to deal with the fact that they're not getting what they're getting. So I say addressing it early is always a good thing. And if they are saying no to something, if you're saying no to something and they're not liking what you're hearing, you can approach it to them and say, it's not going to change. You can allow them to have the moment of tantrum. And then you can kind of don't encourage the behavior by giving reinforcement by attention. So obviously keep on watching your child, but you can just turn and talk to another adult. You can engage in a conversation. Obviously do not leave your child by themselves unattended, but just, you're not giving them the attention anymore, and they'll realize that that's not working. And I think sometimes depending on your child, every child is different and every child goes through this differently, but depending on the child, if the child is certain children, if you say to them, the reason this is no, and the reason why is no is for this, and we'll talk, we can talk about this later, or maybe later we can do this later. Some children will accept that. They'll have a fit, but then they'll accept, okay, no, we'll do it later, or we'll address it later. It really depends on your child. But I think not supporting the behavior with attention, even if it's negative attention, and just going on about your day, they will realize that they won't get the response that they want out of that from an etiquette standpoint. This would be it.
Okay, so we have a game for you.
Oh, there's a game.
Here.
Okay.
Okay.
So, never have I ever.
Okay. Okay.
Never have I ever give up and let my child eat with their hands.
Oh, I have. Even as an etiquette,
I've done it with them.
Even as an etiquette coach, I've definitely done it where you're just like, I can't. I can't anymore.
I didn't expect this from you.
No, because when they're really young, at one point you're like, I have to. At the point you can try and try and try, and then you're like, you know what? It's okay. We need to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Never have I ever been mortified by something my child has said to an adult.
Oh no, I have. Yes.
Yeah.
Never have I ever ignored bad table manners just to get through a meal.
No, I have.
I have not. I haven't done that. No.
Yeah.
Never have I been corrected by my child for breaking a polite rule.
Yeah.
No, I have. My child. Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually. Recently, my husband said to me recently, "Oh, you're doing a good job because now she's correcting my husband, and now she's correcting me too because I said what the other day to somebody, and she said, 'You do not say what, mommy.' I was like, okay, correct. You don't say what." So yes.
So there is a really nice question. I think it's the question of the moment, which is, how do you deal with sibling who fights? Because your kids are super polite till they have to deal with their sibling.
Yes.
And then all manners drop.
Yes.
And it's actually quite upsetting for the parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you instill that politeness continues even the inter-sibling
between siblings?
Yeah.
I think, again, I think we take, depending on the age of the siblings, I think matters quite a bit here, but it depends. I think this is a lot on us as parents and addressing, even before we get into how they can be polite to each other, allowing what's going on between them as to why, because sibling rivalry, I mean, happens, and too much time together, because we're spending a lot of time together lately.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit much. So what my parents did, and I think it's a great thing, and what my husband does, because my husband has older children, so I'm a stepmother to older children, what he always did is he always kind of took one child and did something nice with them, spent some individual time with them. So each child felt like they were getting the attention. And so that kind of gave a little bit of space between the children. And then when in between the children themselves, so when they came back together and they started interacting with each other, there was a little bit more room. So there wasn't so much tension and frustration. And then from that point, when they're interacting with each other, when they speak to each other and you hear them speaking to each other, it's a reminding game. This is like, and this is, I feel like sometimes I feel like as a parent, sometimes I've said things I never thought I would have ever said, ever. like words like, please don't touch that, or please don't lick that, or please don't, things like this, things of this nature. It's just a constant repetition. And the older child, you can approach the older, assuming it's an old enough child, you can approach them in a different way and say, I understand that this is not easy. I understand the frustration that's happening here. But I'm not relying on you. You don't put pressure, but I'm trusting you as a member of this family. Like, we're gonna have to try to get along. Can you help me with this one? So you approach a child that way. But then when they're engaging with each other, just remind each child that they're both responsible to be polite with each other, and we're all loving and polite with each other. And a lot of this does start with the parents. So how are we talking to each other as parents? How are we being polite with each other? Are we being considerate and kind with each other, or as much as we can be with each other? The children really feed off of that, and they will see that and mimic that. But when I think giving them the space is the biggest thing. If you can give children the space and each give them the attention, and then when they come back together, try to reinforce them speaking politely and have maybe different approaches for each kid depending on their temperament and their personality and their age, to try to make this like a team thing. It's not easy by any means.
It's not easy.
It's the hardest one. It's the hardest one, yeah.
I think we've come to the end, but really there's so wonderful answers to the questions, and I think it's the mom's worst nightmare. Yeah. Is what is polite and how polite is polite.
Yeah, no.
But
I think
thank you for that.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.